If you haven't already, Joy Futuro is here, sitting in the corner right next to Michelle. So maybe Joy, if you lean in, the camera will catch him. And if you haven't said hi to him yet, please say hi to Joy. It's nice to have him here. He's now the chief coordinator in the director's office. We'll be seeing, I assume we'll be seeing a lot more of you in the future. Great, welcome. I apologize for the lateness of the board packet. I hope everybody got to stay in and read a little bit. And I wanted to go through some changes to the agenda. We had a lot of stuff flying around the last couple of days. We're going to go through the working group reports for those matters that do not involve a vote. We're simply going to ask if anybody has any questions on the written reports. Then we'll go to the working group matters that require a vote. There's an internal board procedure by the community engagement working group. There's the Thompson Elk presentation of the letter. And then we have a vote on the board officers. We are not going to have any presentation on the I-5 cover. So unless anybody has any objections, I'm going to go ahead and start. So I understand we have one public comment to open the show. And I wonder.
I'm assuming it's troop number 11487.
Troop number 11487. I wonder if you guys can introduce yourself and welcome to the meeting. We usually want to give 2 minutes for comment. But I understand you guys negotiated a little longer term, and we'll give you between 4 and 6. Okay. All right. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
My name is Lynn. I'm Marcus. We are troop 11487. We live in Southwest Portland and are working towards the Bronze Award. We are 5th grade juniors and we've been together for 4 class years. We are a junior Girl Scout troop, so we think of each other as sisters. What is the Bronze Award anyways? The Bronze Award is the 3rd highest award for Girl Scouts, but can only be earned by the junior level. The Bronze Award was introduced in 2001. Our troop's goal with the Bronze Award is to make a difference within our local community. When you're working on the Bronze Award, you have to work over 20 hours to pick and decide a topic for your Bronze Award. Wow, so the Bronze Award is basically an award that only junior Girl Scouts can earn. But in order to do that, you have to go through the process of making a positive impact on your community. Yeah. So what is our Bronze Award project going to be? Well, after hours of research, we identified that after COVID, lots of community members' mental health has gone down in our community. I've noticed that activities outdoors can increase imagination and creativity. With COVID comes depression, not just for adults, kids too. So for our runs, after hours of research, we concluded that we wanted to make a fairy door scavenger hunt to increase outdoor education for adults and kids. With COVID, people mostly stayed inside, cooped up on their screens, which is not good for our mental health or our health overall. So we wanted to create the habit of going outside from fairy doors with inspirational quotes, even if it's just a little time going outside each day. We plan to have inspiring times and encouraging notes behind each of the doors. A few of the examples could be giving a stranger a compliment, picking up your dog's poop, leaving a trace when you were camping and or hiking, or even just some simple compliments. That's what we would like to partner with. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes. Does anybody have any questions? I've got one quick one. Which parks have you identified the parks you want to affect?
Yeah, we want to do Gabriel Park. Yes.
Any questions?
So we're open to any of the parks, but we would like Gabriel Park, which is in our community. Yeah. Or just any of the Southwest Portland. Just we're open to any options, but our number 1 would be Gabriel.
Hi, girls. This is Adina Long. I'm the director of Portland Parks and Recreation. Thank you for your presentation today. It was lovely. I appreciate your choice of Gabriel Park because don't tell anyone, but it's my favorite park. It's in my community as well. And I think that fairy doors in Gabriel Park will be a fine addition. And I agree with you about how important it is for people to pick up their dog's poop and to give each other compliments. So thank you for that. we're gonna be back in touch with you about your idea, okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
very
Troop
much for
114.
joining us.
Thank you.
Very cute. Thrilling. Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, next we have general announcements. Any other general announcements? And we'll move right to the board minutes. I'm sure everyone's had an opportunity to review the board minutes. I'd like to see a motion for approving the minutes. Paul moves second. Second. Mike seconds. Any questions, concerns, comments, changes? All in favor of approving minutes, say aye, or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Director's report.
Great.
Director Long.
Thank you so much. So this past Saturday, we had a really good turnout at the groundbreaking for the long-awaited Park Lane Park. Commissioner Ryan, many staff, project advisory committee members, neighbors, and even former Commissioner Amanda Fritz joined the festivities. I was sorry to not see any Parks Board members at the event, but I'll note that on Sunday, July 11th, we'll be cutting the ribbon at Columbia Children's Arboretum to celebrate the recently completed improvements there. So I'm hoping that we'll see some board members at that event. And of course, there are a plethora of events this spring and summer between our stewardship events and movies and concerts, etc. So I hope you all are planning to visit us in the parks while the weather gets good. The other item I wanted to just touch on was the budget. The mayor's proposed was released last week, Thursday, May 4th. The budget was largely as expected, with all items from our requested budget included. Also included was an anticipated increase in general fund for labor costs totaling $2.4 million. And of course, this fortunately reflects collective bargaining agreements that were finalized during this past current fiscal year. The work session for the mayor's proposed was this morning at 9:30, and there's going to be a public hearing for testimony on May 11th at 6:30, and then the approved budget hearing is time certain for 2 p.m. on May 17th. Sorry if I'm taking any of your items. Right. I just wanted to note, and then I wanted to also note that there are a couple of items that are going to be included in a change memo, which is an omnibus amendment to the approved budget that gets very little discussion, but you all should know about it. We included the levy transfer to reduce Parks levy reimbursement by up to $15 million so that we can reduce any underspending. There's a maintenance mechanic trainee. We're actually adding 1 FTE that's funded with Parks Levy to increase job pathways and increase capacity. That's going to be in the professional repair and maintenance services program. PSEP planting, there's a technical change included in the fiscal year 23-24 budget, whereby 5 FTEs were approved as a part of the spring bump to work on the tree planting program that PSEP is putting in place. We are also converting some security contract dollars that we already have in our roles in order to fund 3 security specialists. The Water Bureau actually has staff that are under this classification, and we're looking to hire 3 to help monitor some of our maintenance sites where we've had a lot of vandalism and safety issues. And then finally, we continue to work with Pioneer Courthouse Square to ensure that their bathrooms are maintained and security is in place for the park. So that's an area where we've been funding that nonprofit to assist with that work. Just wanted to let everyone know about that. And then Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. We're in the middle of writing a Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland report. It's going to be a high-level public report about our work, the challenges, and some of the measures we'll be tracking that we'll be using to track our progress. We hope to share the report with the community in June and, of course, with the board. We'd like, in fact, to have some time on the board agenda in June to bring the report. So I'll work with Casey on that. And then the first draft of the actions and results framework is almost done. And the next steps are that the Bureau will conduct a gap analysis and prioritize work to fill gaps related to performance and results with a focus on serving our centered communities. And this summer, we'll be documenting our process related to all of the deliverables, mission, vision, values, and equity and anti-racism commitment, the listening and learning and decision support tool, as well as that actions and results framework. So just really excited about that work. I'd like to say it's coming to a close, but we all know it's an iterative process. It's not coming to a close, but it does feel like we're at a pivotal moment where we're going to be sharing a lot of the work that we've done over the last 2 years with the public. So really excited about that. And just, you know, the month, I know you guys didn't have a lot of time to look at the documents, but, you know, please, if you have had an opportunity to look at the monthly report, if you had any questions, please let me know.
Any questions for Director Long, either from a oral report or from the written report? I had one actually, because it was a phrase that caught me strange. In the written report, under repair, you start a new section as 71% vandalism. And I didn't know what that meant because it's just kind of out there.
I would have to
yeah, so I didn't know if it meant you repaired 71% of the vandalism or 71% of the funding went to vandalism repair, or I didn't know. But it's in the repair section towards, must be in the next to last page.
Let me
I don't always include that in the line because it can be confusing at context, but generally whenever they give weekly reports from that group, it's kind of commenting, I believe, on how much work they put in on vandalism.
Yeah. Actually, Lauren's on the call. Lauren, can you clarify that?
Yep, I sure can. So every year with our every month with our work order system, we're able to track the number of work orders that are vandalism related. So that's what that is. Casey, that's 70% of the work orders for that month were vandalism.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Appreciate it.
I knew somebody knew the answer.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
Is that typical?
It's been pretty bad. It's been higher than 50% for the whole time since COVID. Wow. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up related to that?
Sure.
Lauren, that's the amount of work orders related to vandalism. Is that equivalent to the amount of work that goes in? Are we spending 70% of our maintenance time addressing vandalism, or are those smaller cases and so it's a smaller percent of the actual work that's done?
So the 70%, the shop that primarily tracks that is the amenity shop. There's 4 different shops. So there's within our maintenance services team. So there's a shop that does carpentry, a shop that does mechanical, electrical, plumbing, a shop that does amenities, which is graffiti removal and repair of things that are broken, especially gates and that kind of thing. And that's the shop that had 70% vandalism. They always track their vandalism because there's so much graffiti going on right now.
Lana, I'm going to answer your question. It is only 70% of work orders. It is not 70% of the work, because that's only one shop,
quarter,
one shop, 1/4 of the 4 shops.
And presumably it's not the largest shop. I'm just wondering, is this equal?
Right.
I assume it's not 70%, but like, is this 20% of the work being done? Is this 5%? Like, how big an issue is this as we think about total parks resources and what we hope parks resources are going toward and what they have to be going toward instead because of what you're handed?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to say that the answer is even more complex than just looking at professional repair and maintenance services, because we also have our land stewardship staff who are cleaning and doing minor repairs throughout the system, also as a result of vandalism or misuse, etc. So it is larger, but it's also more complex. And so I don't think we can give you a number right now. I don't think we can give you an accurate number right now, but I don't know. Tanya came off of mute, so I'm going to guess that she might have something to add to the conversation.
I agree that we cannot quantify it exactly right now, but I think for understanding, it's a significant majority of the work, I would say, that our daily crews are doing, and the PRMS group that's reporting out to the work orders, because the daily care and cleaning employees are providing those work orders, and before they do that, they try to address minor issues. So it's significant. It's a lot of the work, and I think the other challenge we run into, it's been at such a high level for so long, especially during the pandemic, as Lauren pointed out, that in some cases it's gotten confusing for employees whether or not this is just their daily work, and so getting them to report it in a different way is one of the things that we've worked to do. I know Lauren's group provided an extensive report on graffiti in particular about 2 years ago, to give you a sense.
Corbin?
I have a question regarding urban forestry. So if people still want to talk regarding the vandalism, I'll wait.
Any other questions on the vandalism? Allie?
I thought she was going to talk, so I took a bite. Actually, just a kudos. Before I became a board member early in the pandemic, there was a swastika at Creston behind my partner's house. He's Jewish, it's and it was gone within, I think it was 16 or 18 hours of the phone call. So just a kudos to Parks on being so responsive, especially with something like that really impacts community members. So just,
we have the policy is a shorter time frame when it's hate speech. So thank you for that. Corbin, urban forestry question.
Yeah, I have a question regarding it looks like they're looking for a more comprehensive Title 11 tree code and looking at amendments. I sat through a kind of disturbing meeting regarding a request number 26 to delist a heritage tree, and the owners are Victoria and Alston Burton. And I was wondering what has come of that case. It looks like this couple is dealing with elm leaf beetle infestation, which is making their property inhabitable. And like I said, I witnessed some questionable language being used in that meeting. And when will we know about the update regarding both the Title 11 tree code and what is going to come of this particular situation?
So I can speak to the heritage tree number 26. The Urban Forestry Commission had a second meeting and a second vote on that particular tree. And at that meeting, they voted to delist the tree. So the next step is that it will go to council. So that recommendation will go to council, and then council votes on whether or not, to delist the tree. So that is moving forward. In terms of the Title 11 amendments, I'm not really sure when those are coming to council. And I know that we did some technical adjustments earlier this year.
Yes, for the next step for urban forestry is they're going to redo the urban forestry management plan. The current one we have in place is from 2004, so it's well past its prime. And so that will be, I think, over the next 18 months or so. They're out for an RFP to hire the consultant for that now. And then once that urban forestry management plan is in place, then the Title 11 updates will flow from that.
Thank you. I think using, it looks like this particular case of number 26 could be very helpful in understanding the difference between equity and equality, which was tossed around in that particular meeting. I'm glad to see that they moved forward with a second vote. And I'll reiterate this again. I don't want Parks and Rec to be considered either the harbingers of gentrification or the reason communities get displaced. So I'm glad to see that moving forward. So thank you.
Any other questions for Director Long, either oral report or written report? Thank you very much. And thank you, Tanya and Lauren. Moving on to working group reports. Again, this section will only deal with those reports that are not being brought forward for a vote. So first is Board Affairs Working Group. Does anybody have any questions on the Board Affairs Working Group for Casey? Excellent. Community Engagement Working Group, either Aaron or Corbin, does anybody have any questions for either of them that do not pertain to the internal board procedure for community input? Any questions? Excellent. Financial sustainability for Mike or Alana. I don't know who is present. I think only me. Either one of us. Does anybody have any questions on the financial stability working group report? And then land use and infrastructure. Any questions for David that do not pertain to the Thompson Elk or the I-5 setup? And then nominating committee, Elena, I know you didn't provide a written report, but you just have a short update.
Yeah, and I apologize to not have had a written report. We just got dates kind of nailed down in the last day or so. So we do have 17 applicants for 3 open spots on the board that your nominating committee will be reviewing. We should have those applications all reviewed this week. Next week, your committee will decide on interviews, and we're looking at interviews the week of, I believe the 22nd is the Monday of that week. So by the end of this month, I know we're a little bit behind, but by the end of this month, we should have a slate of candidates to bring forward at the next meeting for you all.
Any questions?
Is there also process for the levy committee, oversight committee?
That's a separate
right.
process. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Then
It's just something I forgot. Something I forgot from my my oral report, that the mayors, and this is relevant to the Elk Fountain discussion, the mayor's proposed budget also included 1.5 million in general fund resources as a fund transfer to the Water Bureau to support the restoration of the Elk Fountain.
Excellent.
So
thank you.
The letter might be helpful, but I don't know. So sorry.
Okay, let's use that as a segue. Let's go. David, do you want to bring forth your letter and talk about it? Is it? Do you think it's moot now because the?
No, because they haven't voted. They haven't voted on the budget.
Okay.
Right. So, I would say we'd want to get it in this week.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember that we actually have already approved not the letter, but the idea.
The language.
It's just the specific language. So, David, go ahead.
Yeah, Casey, can you guys see me by any chance? I had to reload Zoom when I logged on to this, so I just see a black screen for myself. So sorry to be so anonymous. I apologize. Yeah, so we voted last month to draft a letter, and I sent out a draft of that letter maybe yesterday or the day before that I'd like the board members to review and take a vote on approving so that we could document our support for that extra $1.5 million of construction costs to be allocated through the general fund and not affect the Portland Parks budget. And that's basically the language of the letter. So Casey, I don't know, do I need to read the whole language of the letter if it's been circulated, or do we just take a vote on sending the letter?
Michelle, do you think you can pop the letter up on the screen or on everybody's screen?
I'll log into the meeting.
I mean, the other way we can do this is has anyone not reviewed the letter? Does anyone have any objections to the letter?
No, I thought Bonnie's comments were good. Sorry.
Okay, Mike.
No, I like the letter. The only question I have is, now that we know it's in the mayor's budget, do we want to tweak a sentence to just say we acknowledge it, it's in the mayor's budget, we support it, something like that?
Good idea. All right. Any other suggested changes? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move that we accept the letter as drafted with the comments from Bonnie and the addition from Mike
noting that we're aware that this is going to the council next week.
Can I get a second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye or show your hands.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, David, very much for going through this. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Next thing we've got is the from the Community Engagement Working Group, the internal board procedure for community comment. Aaron or Corbin.
I can take that on. I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to read it over. Please think of this as a sort of living document that we're going to try this out with the hopes that we can adjust it if need be. So this is just an internal document and how the board is going to react to public comment. We do want to refrain from any sort of I gotcha moments or thinking that we can solve problems during our meetings, or any issues can be solved during our meetings. And so the first page is really just the procedural general introduction around public comments. The second page speaks more to how the chair will operate during this time. And then the third page is more of a script. And so I'm just going to leave it open if anybody has any comments. If you didn't get a chance to read it, I can definitely go into more detail if necessary.
Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the procedures? Great. Any comments, questions, concerns? Okay. Corbin, I don't know if you want to do this as a vote or just simply have it. It's not part of the bylaws or anything like that.
I would like to do it as part of a vote, just for all of us to be consensus of how we're going to move forward with this procedure as board members.
Do I hear a motion to approve the procedures?
Motion, yeah.
Ali, second? Yep. And we got a second from Adam. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye or show your hands. Any opposed? Should always ask for abstains. I haven't yet. All right, motion passes. Thank you very much, Corbin. Thank you for the Community Engagement Working Group for working so long on this. I appreciate it. The next one is, I believe, the Officer Nominating Committee. The Officer Nominating Committee has met and has had the good fortune to talk with several people and would like to set forth the nominations of Corbin as the new chair and Alana as the new vice chair. I think I'm not going to go through everybody's CV just simply because everybody knows each other. I guess as chair of the committee, I will simply put forth and nominate for chair and vice chair Corbin and Alana. Does anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any discussion? And this will be effective tomorrow. I think there's one ministerial act that Bonnie needs to do, but it's basically tomorrow. So if, unless anybody has an objection to that.
Who seconded the motion?
Oh, we have three like at the same time.
Okay. Adam,
Yeah.
It was Ali and then Adam and then
You can
a lot of
choose
people
one.
on this.
All right. All in favor of those nominations, say aye or show your hands.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you so much and congratulations, Corbin and Alana. Looking forward to it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Randy is not here to give the Parks Foundation report. I don't know Mike or anybody. One thing I wanted to note is that I believe we are still looking for a liaison from this body to the Parks Board Foundation Board.
Yeah, I don't know where Randy is in his search, so I haven't talked.
I know, so I know that they just identified additional board members that will be going through an orientation soon. And I only know that because Joey's gonna jump on that orientation. But I don't know where the Parks liaison lines up with that. And I don't know if it necessarily has to be on the same cadence as their board members. So we can ask him when he returns. It's like couple weeks, he'll be back.
I guess I would ask each of the board members here that if you haven't volunteered yet and you have just an inkling, contact Mike. We gotta make sure we have one.
And also note that I attend those board meetings and Joey will be as well. So there's a lot of staff support there. So if anyone's interested and wants to learn a little bit more about what the foundation does, then we'll have to just sort of prepare a little bit of a board report, but it's usually pretty high level.
Very high level.
Very high level.
That's great.
So, and I'll just add also because Randy is out, the Rose City Golf Course, Rose City Playground ribbon cutting, which is a project that we were working together with the foundation and the Rose City community. The playground has been completed, it's been renovated, and while it's open now, they're having a celebratory event on June 17th. So if anyone's interested in showing up, please do.
Okay, moving along. We're actually way ahead.
I have a bit of a question. I have my hands up. Just when would you need the names by? Do we have a deadline for the liaison?
We don't know. We don't know, but I can ask Jessica Green in Randy's absence. She might know.
It'd be nice to get a deadline.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I would say at the end of the day, I'm off the board at the end of June, so ideally somebody would be decided upon by then.
Okay, great. We're moving ahead. We're actually doing pretty well. So I wonder if we have now time to do the Title 20 update. Victor?
I'm ready if you are.
There you go.
Yeah, now we're way ahead. Last time we got pushed all the way. So great. I'll share.
Feast or famine.
Exactly. I'll share my screen here and we'll get rolling. All right, great. Hopefully folks on the other side can see this as well.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. All right, so if folks don't know, I'm Victor Sanders. I'm one of the program coordinators for our Ranger and Safety program here at PP&R. And also with us on the other side is Cameron Simmons, who is a Hatfield Fellow assisting us with the Title 20 updates. I'll do a little recap. We came a couple months ago, but I know there's some new faces and maybe some new folks on the call. So Title 20 is essentially our park rules. So Title 20, it's how city code is laid out, all the different titles. Title 20 is all the things you can and cannot do within parks, all the permitting requirements, etc. What we're working on right now as part of the Park Ranger strategic plan is updating Title 20 to be more responsive, provide clarity, improve compliance, and provide an improved Park Ranger enforcement ability and authority. So this project started a couple of years ago when we had an infusion of resources for the Park Ranger program from council, as well as ongoing work that we have to continue to grow that program. Many of the changes are just plain language. So there's a variety of code that has a lot of run-on sentences that are very outdated. So we're looking to plain language those as much as possible so they're really accessible, but some are more substantive. So we'll talk about those. So for tonight, we'll just review the Ranger's role in park rule enforcement, a recap. Some folks this will be familiar to, review some of the proposed code updates just at a really high level, discuss some of those substantive changes, and then also provide some opportunities for next steps and opportunities for further involvement. So park rangers' roles. Park rangers are non-sworn public safety officials that do all of our park rule enforcement within parks. There's now 50 total park rangers that include seasonals and FTEs, which is pretty incredible when you think just 10 years ago, this was a seasonal program where folks came and went and there was only a handful of folks that were out doing ranger work. So it's grown considerably to patrol the 12,000 acres across our park properties, 280 parks. And as I mentioned, prior to 2013, this was a really small seasonal program. And this was, again, back when you kind of could do seasonal work, right? You could come and go. It was a little bit more affordable to do that. But now we do have full-time career positions where folks essentially join up into the park rangers, usually transition from seasonals to full-time staff, I should say. So in 2022, the Park Ranger program responded to over 3,000 calls for service. So that's folks that call 823-1637 or call 311 or call any other number in the city and say, hey, I've got a problem in parks. And they then call or get transferred to our Park Ranger dispatch. They resolved almost 11,000 park rule issues that they came across throughout our park system. And one item that we're really proud of is that 98% of all of our calls and contacts are resolved without police or fire intervention. So that goes, with things like dogs off leash, someone has a permit issue, there's someone that might be, that's driven into a park, really minor issues that have a large visitor experience and resource protection impact, right? Police might not come out for someone that just has, someone set up a large bounce house or something right in the middle of a basketball court when people are trying to have a basketball game. But those are real user conflicts that we come across every day that are really best suited for a non-law enforcement response. And then another thing that we're really proud of is 611 year-to-date shelter referrals. So the Ranger program works with the Street Services Coordination Center to, when they come across folks that are houseless in the community, to offer them shelter, any available shelter that is throughout the city, and provide transportation as well. So we're one of the largest agencies throughout the city in a public safety role that are providing these shelter referrals. So that's really exciting. And I should say on that 98%, something to keep in mind is that for those 2% of calls where we do need assistance, it's when we really need assistance, right? Those are the types of calls where you're coming across something that maybe there's weapons or threats involved, where we really do need police or fire involvement because it's higher level than what we would typically handle ourselves. So what are some of those Ranger issues that we might be dealing with? They're civil and non-criminal, so really important to keep in mind. When we talk about that 2% of issues, those are really the criminal element, things that are beyond the scope of what you might find Ranger work to be dealing with. So these are civil and non-criminal, so things like smoking in a park, lighting off fireworks, unpermitted large events that are impacting the park, dumping of garbage or commercial garbage, park closure issues after hours, things like noise, abandoned vehicles and boats in parks, drones, removal of rose bushes. I include that because that's literally one of the problems we come across, right? Is folks coming in, and it's not just snipping a rose, but literally digging up the rose bush, right? And taking it. It's a problem that we actually have in the International Rose Test Garden, if you can believe it. And then behavior issues that are impacting the visitor experience. Again, they might not be threats, they might not be violence, but it's something that, hey, this is having an impact on how people are using our parks. Dog off leash issues, one of our #1 calls of concern. Graffiti and maintenance problems, referring that back. We heard earlier tonight, having eyes and ears in parks to report those problems is really important. And operating businesses in a park without a permit. So that might be things like camps or tours. Something that's been really popular lately is the experiences on Airbnb. You may have seen these in some of the parks. Folks set up a big tent with wine and cheese, and they cone off an area of the park exclusively for folks. That's something that we want to be able to take care of, right? You can't just block off a certain area of the park just for you. So that's something that Rangers would respond to and help take care of. And then I just included in there too, similar to Portland Street Response, if the issue involves weapons or threats of weapons, Rangers would notify Portland Police first. So that's two of the things that both of our agencies have in common, is that we would respond differently if there was threats or weapons involved. So what are those tools that Rangers use to solve problems? #1 is generating voluntary compliance through education. That's the top item that we do throughout our training, which is a month-long academy that all of our Rangers, both seasonal and full-time, go through, is generating voluntary compliance through education. So that is what our hope is to do when we go out in the field, is provide that compliance piece through, here's what you need to know on how what you're doing is impacting either the resource of the park or the visitor experience, and how can I get you to come into compliance. The second item is civil paperwork called ejections or exclusions. So this is something where we may issue it to you if it's a repeat offense or some type of problem that's happening in a park. And then what happens with that is you're excluded essentially from that park property for either 30, 60, or 90 days, depending on the offense, or if you have in the past engaged in that same type of behavior over and over again. The third thing we may use is disengaging and routing to PPB for some type of issues. And that's again, because we have a really limited authority framework. We may have to route some issues to Portland Police Bureau or the district attorney to prosecute those offenses. That could be something like somebody drove into a park and they really damaged the turf, right? And it was a vehicle crime, and maybe they hit a bench or something, right? That's something that comes across our desk from time to time, damaging park property. That would be something that we'd refer to Portland Police. And then we just have really limited tools right now, and for select circumstances, primarily ejections or exclusions, but also citations in limited cases for dog violations. So all that to be said, as mentioned at the top of the presentation, we have about 16 different types of codes that we're or 16 different codes that we're updating within Title 20. So I'll run through those now, and of course there'll be time for questions at the end as well. The first bucket that we've divided this up into is really those that we find probably won't have much public impact, and they're really plain language updates only. The first is the rule around, can the commissioner make rules and regulations in parks? Right now, the way that the code is written is that the commissioner can make any rule or regulation they see fit. They don't need to necessarily go back to council to do that. This would change that with the change of government coming. It would allow actually the director to make those rules in consultation with the mayor and the city manager. It would require us to post those proposed changes and then wait 30 days for implementation and public comment. This is typical to how you'd see a National Park Service or other park agencies operate, where these are really administrative type rules. So how deep can you dig if you're doing some type of metal detecting in park? How should we operate tennis courts or basketball courts? Are there certain types of requirements where maybe we'll allow the basketball court to be used for tennis on certain times and hours? So these are really kind of the micro rules and regulations you wouldn't typically see in a code document. You'd see it more in an administrative rule document that would be promulgated by the director. And then these final three are really just, again, trying to keep it as simple as possible and reduce the excess language that we found in many of these old, outdated code references. Code bucket 2 is minor clarifying changes. So this includes changes to how, changes to what happens if your permit is denied. Right now, if you have a denied permit from our customer service center, the first step of appeal is to actually go to city council. Very antiquated way of doing business. You typically wouldn't see that if we deny your permit applications for your child's picnic. It really does not make sense for you to have to go to city council to resolve that. So this cleans that up. For your first level of appeal would now be routed to the director, not city council. And then we just clarify what type of timeline would this happen in, what type of requirements, and what type of reasons would we actually deny permits. So there's some First Amendment rule in here with the city attorney's office we're working on, where really a permit should not be denied except for in really egregious circumstances, right? We should be able to come to a resolution. And I believe this has only happened once or twice in the past since I've been here, and it's for major large events that have happened in the city. But this should hopefully clean that up. And I personally think that's also just kind of an equity issue as well, as we don't want to have to require someone to navigate a really thick bureaucratic system. Possessions of weapons, this will just again improve clarity and provide consistency with other public space rules in our city code. There's some competing interests right now, or rather I should say competing codes, so this is going to clean that up. Animals, that'll clarify that all animals brought by humans must be on leash. This might be a uniquely Portland problem, but actually one of the things we found in our research, talking with some of our park staff and others in the community, is that there's actually, the code is a little bit silent on this. And if you can believe it, we've had calls about, can I bring my llama to the park? And there's not actually a really good answer. So we're going to clean that up and make sure it's really clear that any animals brought by humans need to be leashed. And of course,
I mean, we can bring our llamas as long as they're leashed.
That will mean
you clean up after it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've seen someone brought a big snake,
Yeah.
so you can't
Whoa.
touch us.
Right. I don't think we've reached that one yet. Now I gotta think about it a little bit. Yeah. All right, and then remote control vehicles, just clarifying that with the new drone language that's coming out from the state legislative session. So we'll be incorporating some of that new language that allows park agencies to implement rules related to drones. A couple more on here, disposing of rubbish. We'll create a new category of dumping when an individual is bringing excessive trash, such as construction waste from elsewhere to be dumped in a park. This is obviously considered a higher level of an offense, but right now we just have a singular disposing of rubbish offense, which is treated equally if you were to throw, a can on the ground versus construction debris. Those are weighted equally, and so we divide those up to make it clearer of what littering is versus dumping. And then fireworks and smoking, we'll revise that to clearly restrict fireworks in parks. Right now, there's incongruent code where the fire code has prohibited fireworks throughout the entire city of Portland during fire season, while our code still allows that. And so we need to clean that up to make it clear that fireworks are prohibited in parks. And then there's some more, these are more of our major and substantive changes. So these are ones that are gonna have a higher visibility to the public. First is temporary memorials. So we'd create a code vehicle on how the Bureau will manage temporary memorials. The exact language on that is to be determined, but if you might recall earlier in the presentation, I brought up the current rule that we have where the commissioner can make rules and recommendations on park administrative rules. So that's the language that will likely be used in the temporary memorials section, where we will create a vehicle to say the director will have permission to create these rules, but there will be rules for temporary memorial installations in parks. Park Ranger Authority, we're going to codify that Park Ranger Authority. As I mentioned, rangers have only been around for about 10 years, right? And so they're relatively new in the spectrum of public safety for parks. So we're going to make sure to codify what rangers do, how they do it, and their authority in code and how they operate within parks. Structures in parks will differentiate that time, place, and manner of structure-related offenses. So again, this is one of those codes where there's two very different things, but they have equal weight, where someone may be encroaching on park property by installing a fence or installing a deck, which has happened in the past. That's treated the same as if somebody were to put up a bounce house in a park for an unpermitted event. Those are two very different things. And so we're going to weight those differently and split them out so that it's much clearer in the code how we would operate when we come across those types of problems. Use of wheeled vehicles and devices. This would consolidate all the vehicle-related provisions into one section, authorize the director to issue administrative rules for mobility devices like e-bikes, e-scooters, and hoverboards, etc., and allow flexibility for those changes. The big change on this is that it would open the door to allow e-scooters and e-bikes within specific areas and specific parks, depending on how the director chose to operate that. So that's a big change that's happened right now, or that may happen, right? Right now, e-bikes are actually prohibited within parks. So that is a mobility and accessibility issue that we've come across. This doesn't necessarily answer that question, but it does provide a context and an ability for us to later go back and say, okay, now that we have a vehicle to address this, what's the best way to do that? What type of process do we need to develop to address this? But it does clean it up so that it does address some of the new technology. The code is obviously very outdated. It never anticipated e-scooters, it never anticipated micro mobility, people making money off of this. And so this allows some of that anticipation. Pioneer Court Square actually has its own code within City Code, which is kind of interesting. So this would update that to reference urban park plazas. So Pioneer Court Square wouldn't necessarily be on its own there, but rather we'd have an urban park plaza code to cover Pioneer Square as well as other parks where active recreation is typically not appropriate. That Pioneer Court Square code is really designed to articulate that piece, which is this isn't really a place for active recreation. It has a specific purpose as a public plaza. And here's the type of activities that may or may not be allowed within this area. We'd also remove outdated references to sitting and lying that are prohibited under the new House Bill 3115, which passed last year. There's a couple items in our code which currently outline that you're not allowed to sit or lie on certain types of benches. We'd actually remove that to be in compliance with the House Bill. And just generally from a First Amendment right and from a overall kind of civil rights perspective, there really is no requirement that you're not necessarily allowed to lie down on a bench, right? That's kind of it's one of those pieces that has always been difficult within our code. And so we clean that up as part of this work. And then the final one here is on lawful acts involving alcohol. This would change the authorization to allow the director to issue those administrative rules allowing consumption of alcohol in some parks, but it does not allow alcohol use in parks. It really, again, like the e-scooter code, like the code related to like some of the prior ones we talked about where the director could issue rules, this would open the door to allow only when authorized by the director. So during certain events or certain times, this may be permitted, but it would not outright allow that type of use within parks. So what does the future state look like when these code changes, if they were to go into effect? What we see is a better responsiveness and problem solving to park rule violations for those issues, again, with that significant nexus to resource protection and the visitor experience. So rangers with these new code updates are able to more effectively enforce the violations in parks. It includes our most common calls, so those dog off leash violations, one of our #1 problems that we have. Others would include things like dock mooring violations, commercial dumping, egregious and repeat permit violations, theft of rose bushes, which unfortunately is a problem, as well as fireworks. And then rules and codes, including rulemaking by the director, would be much clearer and provide certainty to staff and visitors. So all of our park rules and policies would be much clearer to find on our website or by calling 311. We'd consolidate and create a repository that would just be much cleaner for folks to find out what it means and what's permitted within parks. So what is next? Now that we're in May, Parks Board involvement, we've met with a few of you, but we're very interested in getting additional feedback offline, meeting one-on-one or holding additional design charrette sessions to help work through some of what that language looks like. Additional offline sessions are very welcomed. In May, we're going to continue to review these changes with our Commissioner Ryan's office for final approval, complete our legal review in June, and then around in June and July, we're implementing a new records management system to help with our implementation of this code for rangers. We anticipate bringing a first round of council updates for just a couple of these items. Because of House Bill 3115 goes into effect July 1st, we'll need to bring a couple of these to council earlier. And then by late summer, early fall, the second round of some of these more impactful elements, bringing those to council for comment and for approval. So I don't see what we have on time, but I know we're doing pretty well on it. So any immediate questions? Oh, perfect. Any immediate questions or comments?
Oh, thank you. That was a good presentation and I appreciated it. On bucket 2, you talked about cannabis use. I was in Prospect Park in Brooklyn last week, and people on the next bench were enjoying some cannabis. And so they have a similar no smoking. Yes. Yeah. So how are we going to deal with that here?
Yeah, so the code was silent on cannabis originally because it wasn't really thought of as a thing, right? And so we'll be adding that as an explicit requirement to our smoking section. Yeah, as not permitted. Corbin?
I would like to see some clarifying language around what is considered active and passive recreation, because I think it's really important for this language to be legible to community members so they're not misinterpreting what it says and not acting appropriately. The other thing that I would like to see is how the Parks Board can be used in collaboration or be part of a way of authorizing or thinking through this. We are a public forum, and I understand that we're giving a lot of leeway to the director, which makes sense versus going to city council, but I would like to see it in collaboration with the Parks Board so we have a community engaged component built into the rules and regulations.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think that's something that we can look at for sure. I know the city attorney had some good ideas and other bureaus have similar ideas to that as well, particularly around parks, or rather, I'm sorry, Bureau of Development Services, how do their rules and regulations get implemented? Who do they bring that back to, as well as Portland Bureau of Transportation? So,
couple questions here. A lot of times people did things they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not supposed to do that. Is there a more comprehensive way of having some of these rules or regulations or guidelines that's available on site that is very easy to understand? And it's just a kind of, I've seen signage that hung really high on the map post. I can't see them because they're way up there. Yeah. And then maybe that can be more uniform kind of interpretive display that gives people, it's like, you don't do this. And then when people have done things they're not supposed to do there, what is the process of the ranger's approach? Do you warning? Do you ticket? What is it that you do? And for the safety of the rangers, is there a buddy system so that someone can stay, someone can go, or they together they can handle the situation when it becomes difficult?
Yeah, I think those are great questions. And to the first one of the things we've been looking at with this project is really auditing what are all those rules that we have out there. There's some very outdated rules. And if you go into some of our older parks, you might see some old signs with some really outdated ordinances on them that you're like, is this even real anymore? Like, is this even a thing anymore? So it's something we've been looking at with our communications team now that they're really fully built out, is how can we get some universal signage throughout our parks that really has those top high level issues that we deal with to make them really clear. What type of language can we use, or not language or symbolism that we can use to really say, hey, here's the 6 major things that happen in this park, and here's what's permitted and not permitted, so that we can get to your point of educating people first. And so that kind of segues into your second question, which is around the ranger kind of interactions. And number one thing that rangers use is education. They don't want to be doing paperwork either. And so for them, it's really, how can I again look at the nexus that this problem is having to the visitor experience and to the resources? What tools should I use here that's going to best get the response that I need? And when you talk to some of the really seasoned folks, seasoned rangers, they'll often enter a park and the problem is right there. And they'll talk with every other person in a park before they get there. And so oftentimes by the time they get to the problem, it's already gone. They've moved on. Because sometimes folks know, right? Mentally, they know they're like, I'm probably not supposed to be doing this. And so by the time the rangers get there, that person's already moved on. And that's, it's an ethos you have to teach. And so that's one of the pieces of our training is really teaching folks, how do we do education first and then move down the spectrum? But then there are other things, right? Like fireworks in a park where folks probably know better, or maybe they should. And, you know, maybe they light something on fire or it might be really egregious. Okay, where on the spectrum do we do that? And that's part of the work that we're going to be doing with rangers with the enforcement manual. And so we hope to get to a really good happy medium on that, which is, all right, where can we do education first and where sometimes does it make sense to immediately go to an exclusion or a citation or an ejection? And there's definitely some nuance to it. Yeah.
And then the buddy system, does that take place now? Or?
Most rangers now ride in pairs. It's not always possible just given staffing in the total area that they have to cover. But the majority of teams out there, they are in teams. Yeah. And that's definitely an extensive part of the training is knowing when do I engage versus when do I not? And so there are definitely instances where there may be a problem at a park and it is, I'm gonna wait until there's somebody else here with me. And you see that quite often. And it's also, you know, it depends on how long somebody's worked with us, their comfort level, their approach, and kind of how they see themselves in that interaction.
Thanks.
Two separate questions. First is, I know a lot of these changes are not substantive, but some are. How do you foresee those substantive changes affecting the work? For example, are we going to end up needing more rangers? Is this going to shift where we have more rangers downtown with the new plaza codes as opposed to in other parts of the city? What does this look like once it goes through in terms of change in work there?
I don't think it would necessarily change the work. I think it will make the work easier for those teams that are out there. And I hope it will make the work easier also for the staff, the park staff. It's getting to really clean up some of these that really haven't been updated for 30, 40, 50 years. So I don't anticipate it'll necessarily result in more calls for service or more problems. It may probably just make it cleaner when it comes to permitting and interactions with the public of, hey, here's really what this rule is or what it actually means. So I don't think it'll necessarily result in additional work.
And then second question, I noticed when you put up the timeline that there wasn't a public comment period. Is public comment happening through the city council process, or is there not a public comment on these changes? What does that look like?
Yeah, for most of this, for this work, we anticipate doing some public comment during city council, but there's not a comprehensive kind of outreach strategies for these, since this is mainly administrative and it's really responding to most of our staff concerns. So we've done most of our outreach internally when it comes to kind of our major staff concerns.
Yeah, wondering about the drone piece. So what's the current rule on drones and how do you foresee that changing, and what factors are you going to take into account when it's like, what parks, yes, drones, what parks, no drones? How's that all going to work?
Yeah, so right now drones are technically not permitted in parks. They're considered a remote control device. It gets really challenging when you start getting into drone territory because we don't necessarily control the airspace above a park, and that's an issue that you have nationally. And so there was a Senate bill at the legislature that I believe has passed now, and they've made a variety of changes to it, that it does provide greater authority for park agencies to say yay or nay to drones, and to create rules and regulations on that. I don't anticipate that we'll be changing and suddenly opening up the floodgates and saying you can have drones in parks, but we definitely will be using that to probably do some messaging around, hey, as a reminder, this is what the code is, and here's the most updated code for us saying drones currently aren't permitted. They may be, we may create a vehicle for permitting them. That's part of what the Senate bill allows, is parks should, doesn't necessarily require you, but you should allow it for utility work, maybe photography, other type of utility, or emergency response rather type of work. But we don't anticipate it changing too much of the work.
Just a comment. I appreciate the notion about signage, and from the context of having been a former state park ranger many years ago when I didn't have so much gray hair, and also in the context of 71% of work orders going to vandalism, signs, especially their big signs, right, huge attractants for vandalism. So keeping it super simple, and most people in parks these days have this, and they could look things up. You could refer people to that, and just not make it a big target for people to vandalize.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that surprised us, Cameron, our Hatfield fellow that had worked on, is really, okay, if you're a community member and you want to do X, Y, and Z, try to find that online, try to see if you can demystify it. And we found that it was really challenging to demystify it. So part of our work with this, again, in plain languaging it, is how can we create a portal and also use the new 311 service, which is great, by the way, to make it easy for folks to call and say, hey, I want to set up a barbecue in X, Y, and Z park. What does that mean? What does that require? And just, again, demystifying what do these permit rules mean, and what is it that we're trying to get to? You know, that was part of Cameron's work, is really having him go through and say, what the hell were we trying to say here? Like, does this even make sense? So again, clean that up so that we can be as clean as possible. So when people call or they have questions, it's really as simple as just going online.
I just was going to add a couple of things about the signage. There are probably 100 plus park rules. How many are there altogether?
A lot.
Come on, give me a number.
How many parks?
No, how many park rules?
Oh, there's got to be over 100.
Okay, that's what I was guessing. So just to keep that in perspective, like, we're not going to put every park rule on a sign. I call it sign pollution, right? And then they lose their impact when you've got too many and they're seemingly conflicting. They look dissimilar. Some are clearly from another century. So I want to have that, keep that in people's minds, and also just to also think that we are thinking about using imagery instead of words because of the multiple languages that are spoken in Portland and also by folks who come to visit Portland. So we're trying to be really thoughtful about how we do that in the future. So it is a thing. And also, as a former park ranger, I will say that, one of our mantras was, ignorance is no excuse. Like, you're not supposed to kill someone, or as a person, it's your responsibility to sort of know what you can and cannot do in open city, spaces. So and it sounds kind of crude, but we can't account for all of the likelihoods of misuse. So, I want to thank Victor and Cameron for their work on this. Cameron's been very quiet, but I see you put the link in the chat, so folks want to pull up the park rules and take a look at them.
I had a question, comment as well. It was interesting as you're reading through this that administratively, a lot of the administration is actually being shifted to the director's office instead of going to council. And I'm kind of wondering, from your office standpoint, are you anticipating staffing up a little bit in order to start handling this, or not just doing it?
It says the director, but it's going to go to staff. No, it's true. It's the same work. Don't think that because it said council before, it didn't end up being our work end as well. It's just inefficiency of it going to the council to begin with. Then the council tells the commissioner tells me, I tell Todd tells Victor, So we've cutting out a middleman.
Good.
Same work.
Corbin?
In instances like that, where it's going to go to staff, this is where I think the board can be positioned as a forum and a way for community members to have a voice on situations like this. A lot of times, depending on the class, the race, how that body is interpreted within that space, they might be managed differently. And being able to have an open discussion and have it in a public forum is something that I would like to push for, versus it just going to staff, that it can come to the board. And I would like to see avenues in which the board can be used, either vetting or as a mic for the community to speak on issues like this.
I appreciate that. Yeah, as you all are aware, we're sort of trying out this work plan template, framework, which we haven't really implemented completely, but we've been sort of piloting it. And part of that was done with the Title 20. So I think, Victor, you had 2 or 3 board members who you worked with, and you went through these, and their input was then helped inform what we're seeing today. And certainly the public is invited to these meetings to also opine. So, you know, I'm not sure how else to invite the public into these conversations. So, I mean, I think we should continue to have those conversations. But we do know that any code change does have to go to council now and likely in 2025. So perhaps one of the ways the board can be helpful is to ensure that that opportunity is very clear to the community, right? Like that's when they should come in and opine.
Well, that's not exactly what I'm saying. So for instance, applications reservation center, it says changes appeals structure for denied permits to go directly to the director. Why can't some of those permits or those appeals be open for the board to engage that work versus it going to staff? I think one of the major issues that a lot of community members and residents have within Portland is the lack of transparency. And I think having some of these denied permits or other issues that are happening within community or within the public, we can use the board as a stage to work this out, maybe even calling in people versus calling them out. Just something to think about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know how many permits are denied for reasons other than lack of availability or inappropriate use. So, I mean, operationally, I don't know if it's something that we want to elevate to the level of board approval. So happy to continue to have that conversation.
A first step there might be just some information for the board about why permits are denied. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like, I don't think
we're looking at things that are just lack of availability. I think that just is what it is. And either we need to address when things become available to make it easier for folks who aren't planning a year in advance to get things, or we don't. When we start to get into issues like unpermissible use, I think then there might be some equity questions around how that's interpreted and things like that, and how different communities might interpret what a permissible use is, and that maybe are communication issues that need to be addressed, but we probably would need to know that before we think about changes.
Yes. I actually, one more thing. I'm also a little concerned about the lack of community outreach, but I'm not quite sure why yet. And I think that's because I haven't read all the changes. I've just seen the summaries that you had. And I'm gonna regret saying this. But I wondered, when you get more meat on it, when you start getting them actually down, may I take a look at them? I'd really like to get more involved and see what the actual changes are. And if they are significant, if they are material, then I might start advocating that, more community needs to come in to take a look. So, because it may not seem material to the people who are implementing it, but it may seem material to the people who are interfacing.
Yeah. I'll have Cameron reach out and we'll see if we can set up some time and kind of walk through a little bit of what we're looking at.
Great. How many pages?
It's not terrible.
All right, guys.
Yeah. Well, I think when these go to council, it's an opportunity. They get heard twice, and then there's 30 days before they go into effect as well. And so I appreciate what you're saying. It's like doing some community outreach to try to
tee it up better.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or not, because most people don't
read the Federal Register.
They don't know.
Right. And so, I mean, we put them up on the website even in advance. Whenever the commissioner's ready to file, before we even go to council, we could just put it on the website and see who wants to come and read them, right? Most of this stuff isn't, right? We're trying to avoid the First Amendment and the state law stuff. So we're not looking for, to have a legal confrontation before we even get to council. So I think that there's sensitivity around that as well, right? So we're trying to picked this line of where we're kind of making more administrative changes this time, but really what they care about are probably the administrative rules.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so
Do I
part
get
of,
to fly my drone or not?
right, yeah.
But that's not these changes.
Go to Holly and then Corbin and then Alana.
Yeah, just on signage as a communications person, I do love signage. I don't love signage pollution, but I love signage for your most important, like, you know, the top concerns that people or questions people might have. Just two recommendations. One, and I'm sure you're thinking this already, but when you're using imagery to convey rules, but thinking of gender, size, race and ethnicity, ability, all of that in terms of representation. But then also I think something that people don't often think of with signage is if there's something people, let's say people are using a park as a skate park and it's not, and it shouldn't be. Providing a, you know, skating's not possible, you know, skating's not allowed here. However, here's a QR code for skate parks all around the city that you can find. So being able to not just say you can't do this, but if you have a problem in a particular area, just pointing people to where they can actually do it. I find that gives people an actual option versus just being like, this sucks, I can't do it.
Yeah,
just some
makes sense.
Corbin?
All right, I'm going to be a broken record with what I'm saying. And I understand that you don't want to open up a can of worms, but at the same time, if we don't bring community in and have their say, then you'll get it on the back end when they're reacting to something. And I think the board and as a public forum is the exact place in which some of this can be wrestled with. And so I would like to see a rollout plan at some point of what this is going to look like, how many new permits might be in place and how do people get a hold of that? And what are there going to be the costs associated or with these permissions? One thing I don't want parks to be a place that only elite folks can have access to, and that we are somehow unbeknownst to us or not thinking through it because we don't have the same barriers to access, that we might be preventing park uses that are very important or necessary in other communities. So I want to put that out there of how do we use the board as a platform for community to have this conversation so they're just not reacting to it, but they're moving with us.
Wow.
So I hear the hesitation from staff about having too much of a public process. And I hear now a few different people on the board asking about a public process. And I'm wondering if there is not time or if there are concerns about having something more akin to a public comment period like we might have for other rule changes. If we might at least be able to see a plan for outreach to some of Parks partner organizations who you already work with, who could help you get a sense from different members of the community who might have different concerns come to mind than staff would about how some of these changes will be received. And make sure that we at least have a broader group of impact in that way, if not in a more formalized way.
I'm happy to work with community engagement team and Victor to get this up on the website and open up for public comment. And I also just want to note I haven't heard any substantive concerns from this forum. So I appreciate that folks want to have more public process. And the information level that we've shared so far, I haven't heard anyone talk about any concerns about the substance other than the process. But I just want to be clear that you want more details.
Right, that's
so
how
we're happy
their substance.
Right.
That's how I'm gonna figure out their substance.
Right, I appreciate that. We would be sharing those details if we had them today. We don't have them because no, I appreciate that. And so the rollout plan is the slide that Victor shared of having city attorney review, get the final drafts, get those reviewed. When we have those final drafts, we will share them with you and we'll make sure we have a public process to put it up on the website and take public comment. That's totally reasonable. I also just want to make sure we're not missing anything here about because there's no financial impact, Corbin, to these new rules. We're not expecting staffing up more, to your question. These are rule changes that we think are improvements, right? And so I just want to make sure we're getting all the questions answered tonight. right, for what we have today. Right.
Questions that we know of now.
That's right, that's right. I just wanted to make sure we didn't have anything missing out there.
No, and actually I'd like to wind this up because we have spent a bit of time on it. We do have a cool project to come, but Corbin, one more round, what?
I just want to say that there might be some hidden costs that you're not being it's not being accounted for at this point. So for instance, if we were to allow drones within the park, they're most likely going to have to go through the FAA drone training, which is like $100+ to get approval to make sure that they're actually using the airspace correctly for their drones. So something like that may not incur costs at the city level, but it's going to incur a cost to community members to operate that drone within city parks. And so that needs to be taken accounted. The difference between what Portland Parks and Rec might be charging people, what city might be charging people, and then what outside resources or you know, other institutions that community members might have to go through to approval. So I don't think there's some hidden costs here, and I think we should just be legible with all of it.
Thank you, Corbin. Todd, quickly.
I totally appreciate that, and that will be in the administrative rule, and we're not proposing anything that we think have hidden costs to anybody.
Okay, great. I'm gonna wrap it up there. I really want to thank Victor and Cameron. We didn't hear anything. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate your time and your rollout, and it sounds like we're going to be talking to you soon. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thanks. So the next thing on the agenda is the update on the North Portland Aquatic Center.
We have Robin Johnson Craig and Ken Rovo here. And Robin, I will let you take it away.
Great. I'm laughing because Victor is a hard act to follow, and I was it's you know, it's hard to yeah, what is that called? It's something, there's a term in baseball, pinch hitter maybe. It's hard to come after Victor, and I actually was here in December for the full Parks Board, and I know that we have a short amount of time to go over this, but I had the same sequence. Victor presented before me on the same topic. So I feel like I'm in deja vu here. So thank you for having Ken and I to share a little bit about the North Portland Aquatic Center, and very excited to be here. And I realized that I just realized that I have 2 PowerPoints open. So I'm just accidentally hit the wrong PowerPoint. So I apologize. I want to make sure I have the right PowerPoint up and ready. And there it is. Okay, so here we go. Thank you again for having us. And I guess I need to share my screen, and I didn't realize I'm not sharing. I'm not sharing my screen yet. Sorry. I thought I was talking, ready to go, and have to get the Zoom ready. There you go. Share. Everybody see a blue screen and lots of blue water?
You're good.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. Okay. Jump back to the PowerPoint, and here we go. So thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here to talk a little bit about the North Portland Aquatic Center. We have been moving along in our project. And so I just want to share a little bit about what we're talking about today. And I apologize, my I got it. Sorry, my victim of having one too many screens open. So I'm just going to quickly update you on our PP&R aquatic service goals, equity and access for aquatics, our project schedule, the project budget, of course, our funding options, our community engagement summary, and what Ken and I have been up to. Well, more than just Ken and I, as a whole fleet of people and what they've been up to and how they've been reaching out to community, and our 3 potential sites for our future aquatic center, which is very exciting. Next slide. So North Portland's, and I know I was here in December, but just, not knowing who was at that presentation, and just to catch you up, our diverse and growing population in North Portland does not currently have a pool that they can use. That is approximately 70,000 people, including 18,000 people of color and roughly 11,000 experiencing poverty without a place to learn to swim, do water exercise. Areas in blue illustrate areas currently served by our full service community center service, 3-mile service area. And I apologize if you can hear the dogs barking. Can you hear the dogs barking?
Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay. So next slide. The new Aquatic Center will serve approximately 22,629 dwelling units that are not currently served by PPNR's level of service metric for full service community centers, as shaded in orange on the map. We hope to provide access and opportunities for young children and communities from diverse backgrounds to learn basic water survival skills and explore additional opportunities offered through an established aquatics community center. Access to these life skills is a racial equity issue. Black children in the United States drown at a rate 3 times higher than white children, and many factors contribute to this unacceptable public health outcome, including the accessibility of swim lessons and aquatic programming. We are currently here, highlighted in orange, working on phase 2, site selection, programming, schematic design, and land use for the North Portland Aquatic Center project. We just had our amazing community workshop number 3 on Thursday, April 27th, and we are waiting for the close of our community online survey to help us understand community preferences for the final siting of the Aquatic Center. We are swimming at a fast pace and are currently wrapping up the task 3 work items highlighted in yellow on the screen. We need to determine a final site for the center, and then we will quickly start our next task of our preferred schematic design work effort. We do have some unanswered questions, especially our project budget. Our preliminary estimates, the low confidence in 2018 estimated a cost range of 36 to 48.5 million. With the cost escalation that we have seen in our other capital projects, we have preliminary identified a 50 to 60 million range, as we do not have this confirmed site or a confirmed program for the facility. We currently have 11.7 in SDCs allocated by Commissioner Rubio, and a $15 million grant from State of Oregon lottery funds secured this past spring with the leadership of State Representative Travis Nelson. I received an update today that the bonds were sold today and have been released. So that's pretty great news. This equals potentially a 26.7 million in funds currently allocated, 31.7 in funds currently allocated to the project development. And we could have a potential gap of 25 to 35 million to fund this facility. We will be continuing to work with you and advance options to consider to fill this funding gap. Potential funding gap options include a voter approved ballot measure, additional future city general fund allocations, for example, funding from capital set aside, or a capital campaign to solicit private donations. I'm going to switch here to Ken, and Ken's going to share a little bit of a summary on our community workshop number 2 that was held in January, and then a little bit about how we will be making a decision on our recommendation for a decision on a site for our facility. Ken?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Robin. And hello, Parks Board and Park staff. Really happy to be with you today. Ken Rumbaugh, he, him. I'm a 5-year Parkey on the Parks Community Engagement Team. And we're going to share with you a recap of how we got to that April 27th event that Robin mentioned. We were at Cesar Chavez School on April 27th. This is round 3 that we're currently in. We're waiting for the survey to close. It'll close tomorrow at midnight. I'm going to share with you what round 2 looked like. Round 3 is mirroring round 2, so you can imagine where we're at here. But on January 24th, we held workshop number 2 at Charles Jordan. Really well attended. About 130 people attended, and we invited folks to participate in small group conversations about this future facility. And these conversations were rooted in the equity, access, and impact criteria that has been developed with community input since April 23rd of 2022, when we kicked this off at an outdoor event there at CJCC. And really quickly, that criteria it was basically fourfold. Make this facility walkable, make it bikeable, put it on public transit, and do all 3 of those things in densely populated neighborhoods, and even more specifically in densely populated neighborhoods of folks living with low income. So we can go to the next slide, Robin. So at the event, there were 10 tables, and we asked each table to have to review the project materials that have been beautifully prepared by ELS. You'll see some of those renderings that we used in round 3 a little later in the presentation. After the presentation, folks were invited to have a small group discussion for about an hour. And these groups of 8 to 12 folks at each table were then asked to identify the 3 parks that they wanted to move forward in the process, 3 of the 5. You'll see the tabulations here. The next slide will be a little easier to digest. When we looked at the totals for the tables, Columbia Park, Northgate Park, and University Park all received 8 votes from those 10 tables. Columbia Park Annex received 6 votes, and St. John's Park did not receive a vote that night. And as many of you may know, Pier Park was the 6th park on our candidate list until about a week or so before this January 24 event. We did learn that some federal grants would make it very difficult and cumbersome, both from a timeline standpoint and from budgetary standpoint, to make Pier Park workable. It was also really far out on the peninsula. So that was eliminated before the conversation about moving this 5 sites to 3. Next slide, please. And as we do with most of our projects like this, whenever we hold a community workshop or community open house, we pair it with a community survey. These surveys are open the day of the event. They remain open for about 2 weeks. And when we send these out on a project basis, we typically get 300, maybe 350 respondents. We nearly tripled that number in this effort. And we knew that this is an important project. We know folks are passionate about this, largely because of the Columbia indoor pool conversation, but for all the reasons that Robin stated, this is an access issue. We're addressing historic gaps in service and access in North Portland. And it showed, folks showed up for the survey. And as you can see, when we looked at all of the respondents, nearly 1,100, the results were in order: Columbia Park, University Park, and then Columbia Park Annex. But it's worth noting that numbers 2 through 4 are within 0.4% of each other. So it was a very close vote in that respect when we looked at all of the respondents. But as we've been telling folks throughout this project, we are prioritizing certain communities here, again, because of the same issues that Robin alluded to. So next slide, Robin. And when we use SurveyMonkey for these purposes, we're able to parse out different community groups. So all the folks who identified as people of color in the survey, nearly 300, you can see that the top 3 were Columbia Park, University Park, and Northgate Park. Next slide. When we look at families with or living with a disability, nearly 250, the top 3 were Columbia Park, University Park, and Columbia Park Annex. And then when, as you may know, I'm working with a project advisory committee. I recruited for this committee back in October, late September and through October, and we convened for the first time in November. Again, when we send recruitment out for this kind of advisory body, we're looking for 15, 18 folks. We typically get 20, 25 applicants if we're on a good day. We had nearly 100 applicants for this committee. It was an exhaustive process to get through all of the applicants. We could have fielded several of these committees from that group. Those folks have worked with me since November. And after all of their work, looking at the data, looking at the community-driven criteria, they recommended in a memo to Director Long and Commissioner Ryan, University Park, Northgate Park, and Columbia Park. And then another really exciting prong in this community engagement effort is a focus group conversation effort that I've undertaken with my partners, Gina Woolley and Jessica Stanton, who have been contracted by the design team to support the community engagement effort. They are leading an effort to convene folks from these priority groups, 6 to 10 people per group. And these groups are being hosted immediately following the community event. And it's just an opportunity for these groups to have really in-depth conversations, again, with these prioritized communities to discuss the site selection and aquatics programming elements and their priorities. And you'll see a bit of a theme here. And I'm going to go over the groups pretty quickly. In the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color group, University Park, Northgate Park, and Columbia Park were the priorities, or the 3 that wanted to move forward. In the senior group, University Park, Columbia Park, and Northgate Park. In our low income and immigrant and refugees group, likewise, University Park, Columbia Park, and Northgate Park. In our youth and competitive swimming focus group, and this has been one of my favorite conversations to have over the last few months. Obviously, folks that are incredibly interested in the final product here, and had an opportunity to work with students from both from Jefferson, but largely from Roosevelt, that have been a really important piece of this engagement. And this group as well, University Park, Columbia Park, and Northgate Park were their top 3. And because obviously all of the focus groups were unanimous, when we look at all the focus groups, those were the top 3. So that was, it paired nicely. We rarely see priorities across different demographics align like this in this way. And this was a pretty easy process. Going from 5 sites to 3 sites was a pretty easy process. We're now tasked with going from 3 to 1, which will not be so easy, but we can go to the next slide there, Robin. So as a kind of a way to illustrate how we got there and all the groups we spoke to, and this specifically is all the groups we're speaking to this round. We have conversations with our Parks Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC. We have conversations with the Parks Accessibility Advisory Committee. We have conversations with my Project Advisory Committee. The larger community workshop event, this April 27 event, was attended by about 120 folks. The community survey, which we will again have well over 1,000 respondents to by midnight tomorrow. And then the focus group effort, we just wrapped up 5 focus groups in 5 nights on Saturday. And we're getting that information set for presentation with Director Long, and then later Commissioner Ryan. And then of course today we're here with the Parks Board. So excited about any questions you may have about the process so far. The photos, by the way, you're looking at there are from the January 24th event at CJCC. So with that, if there be happy to answer any questions about the engagement thus far or upcoming, if anybody has any questions.
Sabrina, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks so much for this. It seems like you all were really trying to be intentional about the outreach that you all did and engagement. I'm wondering if there's any narrative that goes along with this, something that maybe you've seen or something that we could take into consideration outside of the numbers. These are helpful in the different focus groups. I'm wondering, is there anything else that you could share that's kind of more of a narrative or what you observed?
Yeah, certainly. So community engagement summary, I would be happy to share with the board, Sabrina, which we compile a community engagement summary after every round, and would be happy to share that with the board, absolutely.
Yes, and we do have the community engagement summary from the workshop number 2, and we're cycling through preparing the community engagement summary for number 3. So we'll be able to share that with you shortly.
Robin, can you unshare your screen so we can see folks who have questions? Thank you.
I will share that I do have about 20 more slides to quickly go through if you want to.
Never.
I'm not quite done, but
okay. No, I think you should continue then.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think
that was not clear.
No worries.
Do it.
I gotta go back to sharing the screen. Okay, there we go. So here we are. Share and put that away. And here we go. So just to that sort of gets you up to speed, and then just to quickly go over sort of where we are and what we found, and just sort of I would say, the work that Ken and Jessica and Gina have performed in this last round are really about, that human connection, about making community, creating community, and having real relationships. And that really happens in the community workshop events, the focus groups, the stakeholder interviews, the project advisory committee. It's really amazing. Then we also have the quantitative side, where we're looking at sort of the numbers and how to respond to what the community has asked for as far as walkability, accessibility, locating it near high density, how we consider gentrification, et cetera. So this slide, we basically have the 3 sites, and we looked at a couple different ways to look at this. We looked at the total number of dwelling units in that 3-mile service area. Columbia Park was number 1 because their service area dips in that 3-mile range, reaches over to interstate and grabs a lot of high density housing that's along the interstate corridor. So Columbia Park was the highest. The rest of these categories are really looking at that half-mile distance because that's how community responded about how they wanted to serve community was within that walking distance. Like, who are we immediately serving? We want to meet community where community is. And so looking at affordable housing units, University Park was had the highest amount for number of people of color within the half-mile range, University Park and Northgate. So we also gave, because we know the Census Bureau is a little flawed, not everyone responds, we gave a little bit of a range, so a little plus minus. So we have 2 number 1s. People living with low income, University Park was the highest. Youth, University Park was the highest. Columbia Park and University Park were tied for highest amount of seniors. And then we also looked at sort of those hidden relationships that really is about creating those, the community organizations, the resources, the outreach that occurs in proximity to each of these sites. And I've heard the supervisor at Charles Jordan Community Center talk about how University Park, because of this sort of plethora of community resources, it really is a community campus. So I won't read all these out to you because I think I have, 3 slides per minute, but it's all in the packet of the information that was shared to you, and I'm happy to follow up. We also looked at understanding that all 3 of these sites are really in close proximity. Columbia Park and University Park are about 0.7 mile distance. University Park to Northgate is about 1 mile. So they're very close in proximity. So when we're talking about gentrification and changes for how do we stabilize and prepare for gentrification and stabilize community, what we heard from BDS and Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and the Housing Bureau is really placing the facility in proximity to University Park or at University Park really says this center is for the community, and because of the amount of federally funded housing in that proximity, that is the best way to stave off gentrification. We also looked at access, and I won't go through all of these, but in general, they're all really accessible. They all have really great rapid transit routes that are in direct proximity or very close to the front door. They're all they all have either bike lanes that are in proximity or bike lanes that are going to be put there pretty soon by PBOT. So just, it's hard to pick one over access. What we did here at the community workshop was kind of interesting, is a lot of people chose Columbia Park because they felt that it was centrally located because of its location on Lombard, whereas other people are thinking about accessibility in relationship to density of housing, like at University Park, which makes that more accessible. So it depends on who you talk to and their definition of access. So that was kind of an interesting finding from the community workshop. And then just from, we had an initial look at loss of tree canopy. These are a potential range. It's just a range. This was not, this is not defined. So I'd say these numbers are just sort of a potential number, and it wasn't a way to, it was a way to sort of say, well, this might be a potential scenario, but is not, how we would necessarily pick one of these sites. They all are going to lose about basically 3 acres to development. And if you look at any of these existing sites and you're thinking about a building that's potentially 60,000 square feet and the associated parking lot, any one of these park sites is going to feel that impact. And through conversations with urban forestry, they understand that when you're building a 3-acre footprint, you're going to have tree impacts. We do have some existing recreational uses. For example, next to University Park, we have a lit ball field, and next to Northgate, we have a pretty awesome rugby pitch. I guess the intent on all of these is that we're trying to maintain existing recreational activities. And if we do impact, we would have to consider how we potentially mitigate those activities through the project. So we have these 3 different sites, and I'm going to run through these concepts pretty quickly. I'm not going to try and narrate them all. There's a lot of information here. but it just sort of gives you a feel for how the design team is approaching the various opportunities and constraints that the site presents, and they all manifest in different designs to try and give really a range of what it could be like, and really to provide that opportunity to provide the vision of what it could be. Again, these drawings are really lifelike and real, and any one of them would be amazing, and you immediately want to put yourself in the building and can imagine what it would be like. But we really need to focus in some way on what we're really doing for this final site selection, so that we're really considering what this 100-year investment could be and should be for the community. So the first one up is Columbia Park. And really the best site for that is where the Columbia Pool is currently located. The design team came up with a pretty tight design next to the existing ball field located on North Chautauqua, with a parking lot to the south, to really create an open space. One thing that you'll see on all the sites that is an issue is we have two front doors. There's a front door to the street right away, but there's also a front door to the park. And so how do you make two front doors, and how do you make the facility feel safe, welcome, and inclusive to people either approaching from the street or approaching from the park? So you'll see that in all of these designs. There is a view of potentially what it might look like. There's an aerial view. And we've done, these are the two sequoias that are currently in front of Columbia Pool. So we're definitely looking to save as many trees as possible. And then they provided just a layout of how the inside would function to support aquatics programming and public access, and where the front door is located, where the all-user restrooms, where the locker rooms are located, offices, etc. And for all the designs, they're all apples to apples as far as the same amenities and program that's shown in the building is represented in all three designs. The next one is Northgate, and I'll try to go quickly. Again, Northgate is located here south of Fessenden. The candidate site is basically trying to hug as close as we can to Fessenden. We have the number 4 bus line located, which is a rapid bus route on Fessenden. And we also have an existing parking lot, and then the existing rugby field. Clarendon Early Learning Academy is a great Portland Public School preschool program that's located just to the east. And then we have the existing park facilities that are to the south. There are also some giant sequoias located in the north east corner and the southwest corner here. And here was potentially a way to create a much different type of program layout where the building gets very long. There are some site constraints. There's about 8 feet of fall between here and this back of the building. All of these buildings have a public entrance that's very public facing, including a TriMet drop-off, ADA parking, and some type of amenity program, such as a spray play that sort of eases people into a water experience. So not everyone is ready to get in the water, but sort of creates this sort of, a leap pad or a lily pad to going into the facility. And then there's a picture of what that might look like. Again, this is Fessenden here, and then that entry plaza, the parking lot. And again, we have a leisure pool and a lap pool. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next picture. Let's see. All of these, again, are going to have a public entrance in the front, and then potentially a separate secondary entrance for competition events that would use a different door for competition entry. All of these are also showing a 25-meter pool, which is 25 meters by 25 yards, with spectator seating for 300, and a separate competition locker rooms and all user changing rooms for specifically competition pool or lap pool. Sorry, I'm gonna go next one. University Park.
Hey, Robin, if I can stop you right there. We scheduled public comment at 6:45, so I just want to make sure there's no one here or online that wants to make any public comment. Anybody? Okay, Robin, thank you.
Okay, I promise I only have like 4 more slides. University Park. University Park, again, here, Charles Jordan. We have Rosa Parks Elementary School, the Regents Boys and Girls Club, the University Park Seventh-day Adventist Church, and then we have Mount Olivet Baptist Church, which is the oldest African-American church in Portland. And then over here is the National Guard. This existing area is where the lit ball field is. We do have some pretty significant large tree canopy to the east and south. And really the best way to create a new facility is to not directly connect it because of a long story with BDS, but potentially we would place this candidate site, as close as we could to Alaska. Again, number 4 bus line, rapid service route here. So really great connection. And then the key here is really making a physical and emotional connection, honestly, to Charles Jordan, and the operational value, just something that doesn't show up as far as the quantities on those quantity charts. Again, this is a campus, the relationships, the community, the members of the public that use Charles Jordan Community Center would have the potential to use the Aquatic Center and really expand. It's exponential being able to have that as far as operation ability to support community with these two facilities side by side. And then, so there's a potential layout of how they could be connected. Again, the plaza is then creating this sort of pedestrian area that connects to the Charles Jordan entrance. There's a direct connection off of Alaska, parking off of Foss that connects to the existing parking lot, and also a service entry and competition entry on the east side. And that's potentially what it might look like. An aerial view looking towards the southeast and just going quickly. They call these a bar scheme. So again, you have your public entrance, the lap and leisure pool, the leisure pool, the lap pool, and the separation of support facilities. So we have 3 very different concepts for 3 different sites. The bar schemes for Northgate and University Park are more interchangeable. The Columbia Park is much more of a cube, and they were really, so it's not necessarily translating to the other sites because we're trying to conserve as much open space. So we have 3 very strong choices. We have a lot of information to support this. We can send you the link for the full community booklet. The full community booklet, which gives a lot more information than what I'm able to give tonight. And we also have the community survey link that I think Ken can share you that's specifically for the Parks Board. And so which location is your most preferred park site? And what are your top 2 reasons for selecting your preferred park site? And these were the reasons that community asked for: was most equitable, most accessible, nearest to schools, community resources, most positively impacts the park, and most transformative for the neighborhood. So I appreciate the opportunity to share. I can turn this off and answer any questions.
Thank you, Robin. Questions? We have one from Swan.
This is really fun because I was on a aquatic center design team last century project in the Bronx. And I don't know if our director knows of that, the Lehman College Apex. It's a bar scheme and got Olympic-sized swimming pool. Back then, it's a very simple, but yet it's a type of project that is very expensive because of long span, because of site work, and all the equipment and all that. Back then was $29 million. And I don't know, I know nowadays we have all these very fancy rendering tools. Things in a very conceptual level can look really beautiful. And for laymen looking at it, they felt like it's done, it's beautiful. And these renderings tend to bring up a level of expensiveness that by time the brick and mortar really needs to be detailed. You just value engineer the thing to death. And then the community say, what do you mean we can't have that and can't have this? And I really hope that we are making sure that whatever we do, the cost estimate, the cost control from the beginning is bringing a very realistic way of being able to get the community not hype up so high that they realize they probably have to cut a lot of things in order to bring to the budget. So unless you have really great donor pool, and then just go for it. But really appreciate this level of conceptual design on the stage. Thank you.
Adam?
Yeah, I have two questions and only one that I want an answer to right now. The first one I don't need an answer to. Ken, thanks so much for sharing the engagement metrics and all the participation that you all have had in this project. What I'd love to know in a follow-up potentially is, what have you done differently, if anything else, to boost this level of participation, and how can we replicate that for future projects? And the one that I am curious about is, you all briefly touched on needing to relocate sports fields, green spaces, things like that. And I'm curious if there's a strategy to consider which parks currently have the highest usage in spaces that you would be overlapping with. And I'm curious if you could share anything about that. I mean, it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? You want to put the pool in a place that people are frequenting. And so putting it in a place that has a high level of usage is great, but you also don't want to displace people that are using that space already. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I'm sorry, I'm typing your question so I can refer to it. I worked with our customer service to look at, well, two things. I talked to our customer service folks to get an idea on reservations and who's reserving these fields, what's the level of use. And then I spent some time actually interviewing and having meetings with our own recreation team. And so I can tell you, for example, the field directly adjacent to the location of University Park, that one field, not a lot of use. Like, recreation folks could basically let that go. The field itself is used mostly for soccer, but the field that's located closest to the playground at University Park, much higher use. There's much more consternation about losing the lit field at University Park. The lit field at University Park is a high use for different softball and rec league type of play. So that's one thing. We looked at the potential of shifting that field to the south to see if we could potentially move to the south and still maintain the field on that space and fit the bar scheme across the east-west northern border. There is potential for that, and we need to look at that further. And then the other reference point is, Northgate Park has the only rugby field in the entire PP&R inventory, which is pretty amazing. It's highly used by the Tongan community. It's one of the first calls Ken made out to the Tongan community member. And I'll just paraphrase from Ken's experience, is that the Tongan community loves that rugby field at Northgate. And so we were very concerned about displacing that use. Potentially, we were trying to look at, again, shifting that rugby pitch to the south to maintain it. And the Tongan community member that shared their response was that they would love to see that aquatic facility at Northgate, because they are there, and it would just be this symbiotic relationship between their field use for rugby and also being able to use the pool. So I also want to put in context, this is a very big decision. It's a very big number, a lot of zeros on this facility with our escalation, the current construction market volatility and potential of escalation from 14 to 17%. Hopefully that's going to downgrade in the next couple of years. We're going to have a lot of zeros on this project. A field a typical field development, working with my immediate manager, we potentially estimated to be 1.5 million for development. So we're looking at something that's a $60 million decision versus a 1.5 additional investment in a field. So I understand there's community ties and there's community history and community preference, community access to those fields. But again, they're all within 1 mile of each other. So it's not a big, we're going to make, either any one of these sites is viable. I think that's the hardest part about this, is that any one of these sites is viable. And we're going to have an impact on any of them, I guess is the way to put it.
Thank you. I'm mindful of time. We got Corbin and Aaron, and maybe we can wrap it up after that. Corbin?
So my question has to do with kind of how we started the conversation about having access to the pool is important for life skills. But at the same time, it doesn't look like there has been dedicated programming for the aquatic center at this point. So I'm wondering, is there an opportunity for you to pull from like Justice 40, the IRA, some EPA funding and situate this as an environmental justice issue, and having access to, for this particular community, to have swimmerships and use this new facility as a place where school children can come throughout the school year to learn how to swim, maybe in 3rd and 4th grade. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because that's exactly how I grew up in recreation, is that we had swimmerships that as public school kids in 3rd and 4th grade, we had a week of swim training to make sure that everybody is able to navigate water and hopefully to reduce any of the accidental drownings that can occur when you don't have this skill. The reason why I'm asking you this, because I think some of this might be situated as an amenity and not necessarily the heavyweight being put on as a critical resource for the communities that exist in that community at this time. So how are you looking at programming is what I'm saying. And also, how are we going to use this facility to really upend some of the barriers to this life-saving skill?
Corbin, this is Director Long. I'm just going to intercede for a second. I think that this is a question more for Maximo Behrens and his team around programming. Because Robin is more about sort of, the design and development of the facility, and the engagement is in Ken's camp. So Maximo, if you're available to come on camera and talk a little bit about the uses that we envision at this site.
There we go. Am I off? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Great. Well, the the staffing and the programming for this have been running kind of concurrent, and we've been working really closely with Robert and team through all of this, and making sure that throughout the design process, that we are making sure that our staffing components are, and the information we're supplying is kind of commensurate with what we're looking in terms of the facility structure overall. And so, and with that, we're overlaying that with our base programming of swimming lessons, being able to have lap swimming, being able to do open swim, as well as our family swim and our water exercise programs, which is pretty much our kind of base offerings for all of our aquatic facilities. And then right now we're also intaking information as we're implementing our the parks levy right now, as well as the access pass, having conversations with users and seeing usage, and also talking with non-users, people who aren't using facilities right now, but would be interested in additional programming, and really making sure that as we're really trying to build up staffing to be able to meet our current needs, that we can continue to match that with what the public is looking for in terms of existing usage as well as desired usage going forward with that as well too. So some of that is going to be included in our existing programming that we had at Columbia Pool that we're going to have for this site and scale that accordingly based on how the overall facility will eventually be established and run, but really looking to see where we also have opportunity to grow programming where there's need, interest, as well as additional opportunity for us to continue to carry that forward. And with Ken's help with that as well, we've been able to kind of capture that in existing surveys right now, and those conversations will be continual, will be ongoing.
And Maximo, may I add to that as well, just from a community
Please.
engagement?
Yeah.
And so Dr. Corbin, great question. Some of the most important conversations that I've had throughout this entire process are actually my two first phone calls were to Sierra Hill, who's the athletic director at Roosevelt, and Felicia Wright, who is now the former athletic director from Jefferson. And conversations with 8 different PE teachers of elementary schools in North Portland, dreaming of exactly that. I was a David Douglas student, and we waited until 5th grade to do it. I think it should be done sooner. But we have these PE teachers dreaming of exactly that, providing as part of their curriculum an opportunity for, if they had it their way, 2nd grade students to participate in life-saving water safety skills and swim lessons in this facility. And they've been a really big part of the where do we put it conversation, because logistics is a thing, right? Like we want to put it in a spot that works for all of them. I could name 100 more people that Morgan Spriggs, the founder of the Black Swimming Initiative, Dina Marshall from Waterstrong, that have been instrumental in thinking about it through that lens. And that's how I open every conversation with the PAC, and it's the central point of the engagement work that we're doing when we think about where it goes. The programming, though, so much work to do in that. I mean, we could build the most beautiful facility ever. We have to do the programming work you're talking about once the doors open.
And the reason why I ask that is because if you can situate it as intentionally trying to serve a vulnerable community, does that open up pots of money through the federal government to close gaps in funding? And so so that's also part of my question. And I understand we're short on time, but is that an opportunity to find revenue in places to close the gaps, being more intentional around an EJ issue?
Dr. Corbin, I'm going to interject because not only do I love your question, but I think also Aaron put a question in the chat more about a concern about the gap. So I think that there is an ongoing conversation about funding, and I'm going to say that we can continue that conversation because we've got more funds to raise. And so I'd love to hear anybody's ideas. I know that internally we've had some conversations around partners and partnerships, including with school districts and others on how to how to address the funding gap. So maybe we can table that for another time. Unfortunately, we have a lot of time to talk about it, but time goes quickly and we do have a lot of funds to raise. So thank you, Dr. Corbin, for bringing that up. I'm sorry if I misheard your question, but I think the answers were good to listen to anyway.
I want to thank Ken and Robin and Maximo for coming in, and I agree with Aaron and Director Long. We're gonna have to hear from you guys again soon about how, what you're gonna choose and how you're gonna fund that gap. But thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation. Thanks for all the questions. Last thing is before we adjourned, it looks like we're going to have our next meeting on June 23rd, which is going to be our retreat. Michelle's going to send out a statement for that, and that will be in lieu of our meeting. So the only meeting we will have in June will be the one on the 23rd. There will be hopefully a social on the evening before. Hopefully you can all make it. And at that time, Corbin and Alana can lead you all forward. Thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate it. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Great meeting.